The sky was dark, not from clouds but from smoke. Ash floated down like snow, all around. The land was quiet, too quiet. The battlefield stretched for miles, filled with the broken bodies of both humans and aliens. Machines were torn apart. Ships lay twisted. The ground was blackened. Fires no longer burned. Everything was already dead, except for one man. A lone human walked slowly through the dead field. His name was Kane. He wore a torn battlesuit, stained with ash and blood. His boots crushed cracked helmets and dried remains as he moved forward. Around him was strange body-slong, spiked creatures with purple skin. The Threxel they had ruled half the galaxy, and now they too were gone. But they hadn't died in battle. They had died from something else. All around their bodies, glowing plants grew. Small, bright green. They pulsed with light, and they were deadly. These plants weren't normal. They didn't grow from soil. They were weapons, living weapons. The Threxel had created them. Each one released spores into the air. A single breath killed anything alive. Humans, animals, even other Threxel who weren't protected. The spores spread fast. Whole cities fell in hours. Humans didn't have a cure. Their suits failed. Gas masks melted. Entire armies vanished. Billions died. The war seemed over. But Kane was still alive. He stopped near a large pile of dead soldiers, both human and alien. He looked down. The glowing plant was there, growing out of a human chest. It pulsed alive. Deadly. Kane didn't flinch. He bent down, removed his helmet, and stared at the plant. Then, slowly, he reached out, touched it. It didn't kill him. He pulled it free, and without a word, he bit into it. Green liquid dripped from his mouth. He chewed, swallowed, then looked up at the sky. A red dot blinked in the clouds. A drone, a Threxel spy drone. It hovered silently, watching him, recording him. Kane smiled, a slow, cold smile, and kept eating. High above the planet, the drone transmitted the footage. Inside a Threxel command ship, a council of alien leaders gathered. The screen showed the human unmasked eating the spore. Plant no sign of pain, no death, only hunger. The Threxel High Commander leaned forward. His eyes twitched. This is not possible, he said. Another Threxel officer clicked his claws. The plant is lethal. It destroys blood, destroys lungs. But he lives, the commander said. He eats it. He enjoys it. They watched the video again, this time slower, frame by frame. No tricks, no protection. The human had touched it, with bare skin, breathed in the spores, swallowed the core, and lived. Far below, Kane sat on the broken steps of a dead tank. He stared at the plant in his hand. It was bitter, but he didn't care. He had eaten worse. His stomach didn't turn. He felt no sickness, in fact. He felt strong. He looked down at his hands, slight trembles, then stillness. His skin had small green lines now, running along the veins. He wasn't afraid. He had trained for this, months ago. They told him he'd probably die. No one else had survived the tests, but Kane did. They had changed his body, added something to his blood, modified his cells, taught his gut to fight poison, his bones to resist rot, his lungs to swallow death. He was the only one left, the only one who could eat the weapon. And now the enemy had seen it. Good, let them fear. Back on the Threxel ship, panic grew. The footage spread to other ships, other fleets, other leaders. Whispers began to move across the stars. They can't be killed. They eat our weapons. They are not humans anymore. The Threxel had won every war, until now. Not by guns, not by strength, but by fear. And now, fear had turned. It looked like a man with a smile full of poison. Kane stood again. He looked at the sky. He knew what he had done. He wanted them to see. Let them watch. Let them send more spores. Let them try again. He would eat them all. He walked across the field, each step crushing dead flowers. Glowing spores lifted into the air, but they didn't hurt him. They flowed around him, like mist, like fog before a storm. He reached a broken unit, tapped the control. It sparked, then blinked on. He pressed the record button, spoke one line. You made this to kill us. He looked at the last piece of the plant in his hand, took a final bite, chewed it, swallowed, then added, but I made it my food. He sent the message to open space, to every channel, every ship, every enemy. then dropped the cum. Turned and walked into the smoke. The Threxel didn't respond. They couldn't. They had no words, only fear. The man had eaten death and smiled. The war had not started with death, it had started with fear. The Threxel were not the first alien race to meet humans, but they were the first to truly hate them. They saw humans as slow, soft, emotional, weak. To the Threxel, strength was everything, fear was a tool, death was a language, and they believed humans would be easy to break. At first, it looked like they were right. When the Threxel invaded the outer human colonies, the humans fell fast. Their weapons melted, their shields cracked, their fleets were torn apart by bioships, giant living machines that screamed when they fired. Threxel didn't use metal, they used flesh, bones, living matter. Even their bombs had teeth. The humans had never seen war like this, but they did not give up. They retreated, regrouped, adapted. 3 years later, Earth was burning. One by one, human cities fell. A final weapon was deployed by the Threxel, a living plant. It looked harmless at first, small green beautiful, but the spores it released were pure. Death, invisible airborne, unstoppable. The plant landed in cities, and within minutes, the people began to choke, then bleed, then fall. Hospitals were overrun, masks failed, hazmat suits dissolved. Scientists called it Sporex, the Threxel called it the Ender. They dropped millions of them across Earth, Mars, and every known colony. In just 3 weeks, the human population fell by half. The war was almost over. The Threxel celebrated. Too early. Cain had been underground when it happened, not hiding. Training. He was part of a failed experiment, a desperate program called Project Eta. Scientists had started the project in secret. They knew they couldn't stop Spora-X. So, they decided to swallow it instead, not by force, but by change. They began modifying human biology, testing new gut bacteria, altering DNA, trying to make a body that didn't reject the spore, but welcomed it. It was madness. Many volunteers died. The bacteria fought the body. Instead of the spore, cells broke down. Brains boiled, organs collapsed. Cain watched them die, one by one. He didn't flinch, he didn't run. He let them inject him again and again, day after day, until, one morning he woke up and felt nothing. No pain. No fever. Just hunger. He asked for more and more, until the spore was no longer poison, it was fuel. When Earth finally went silent, the scientists sent Cain to the surface. Everything was gone, but the spores were still there. The plants were still growing. So Cain walked into the dead zone, and took a bite, and lived. Now, high above, the Threxel Council gathered again. Their screens showed new reports, strange data. Humans weren't dying anymore. Some had started eating the spores, only a few, but enough. They were changing, not as fast as Cain, but it was spreading. One Threxel general slammed his claw on the table. This must stop now. They were supposed to die. Another hissed. The High Commander said nothing. He was watching Cain's message again. You made this to kill us, the human had said. But I made it my food. The words echoed in the chamber. Terrifying. Terrifying. A distant moon. A Threxel scientist ran more scans. They had collected samples from the planet where Cain had walked. His footprints were still there, and where he stepped, the spores had changed. They were no longer toxic. They were merging with the soil. Harmless. Even weak. The scientist gasped. Cain was not just immune, he was corrupting the weapon, turning it into something else. Meanwhile, in a hidden lab under the remains of New Toronto, a human signal lit up. A few survivors huddled together. One of them watched Cain's footage. He did it, she whispered. He really did it. Another coughed, bleeding. Do you think we can too? She nodded. There's a copy of the treatment, she said. From Project Eta. It's not safe, another warned. She looked at the spore plant growing outside the cracked wall. Then at her dead brother, and made her choice. I'd rather become like Cain than die like this. Cain didn't stop moving. He walked across the ruined landscape, heading west, toward a fallen Threxel ship. He had seen it crash days ago now. He wanted to see what they had left behind. Maybe more spores, maybe more weapons. He wanted to eat it all. His hunger grew stronger every hour, but so did something else. He was changing. His skin no longer bruised. He didn't feel heat or cold. His eyes could see farther. Now he could hear the faint humming of spores in the wind. Whispers, voices, something deep inside him was connecting dot to the plant, dot to the air, dot to life itself. At the crash site, he found bodies, Threxel scouts, dead from their own spores. He stepped over them, entered the ship. Inside was dark, but Kane's eyes glowed slightly now. He moved through the alien corridors until he found it at C dot, big dot, alive. It pulsed like a heartbeat. The next generation of the weapon. He stared at it and smiled. Far above, the Threxel Council saw the live drone feed. Kane was no longer just a survivor. He was a threat, a disease, a warning. The High Commander turned to his generals. Begin evacuation of outer sectors, he said. Leave the infected zones. Seal the borders. Pray it doesn't spread. But it was too late. Kane had already eaten the seed, and the change had only just begun. Long before the spores fell, Earth knew something was coming. They didn't know the name Threxel yet, but they saw strange lights beyond. Jupiter, disappearing colonies, silent signals from Mars, whispers of creatures using living ships. The governments didn't warn the public. They barely told each other. But one group took it seriously. A secret division inside the United Earth Defense Corps. It was called Lab 7, buried deep beneath Greenland's ice. No cameras, no exits, only orders. Any cost. Inside Lab 7, scientists worked day and night. They studied alien spores collected from early attacks. Most plants burned on entry to Earth's atmosphere, but one survived. It was locked in a sealed glass pod. It glowed green, pulsed like a beating heart. When exposed to mice, they died instantly. Not from choking, not from wounds. They just stopped. Organs shut down. Brains cooked in seconds. It was beautiful and horrifying. Dr. Arlen, the lead scientist, stood in front of the pod. It's not just poison, he whispered. It's a message. The military wanted a cure. Dr. Arlen said no. A cure is not enough. He argued. This thing will evolve. It was designed to kill. We must learn to consume it. Consume? The general asked. You mean like, eat it? Yes, Arlen said coldly. And live. They launched Project Eater the next day. Volunteers were rare. Most were prisoners or terminal patients. But then came Kane, a soldier. Silent, unbreakable. He didn't want rewards. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, if it helps us win, I'll do it. He was accepted on the spot. The experiments began. First, Kane was injected with modified gut bacteria, engineered to break down alien toxins. It failed. His stomach swelled. He vomited blood, but he survived. Barely. They adjusted the strain, added fungal spores from Earth's deepest caves, then snake venom resistance proteins. Then something new, something found in the alien spore itself. It was risky. It could change his brain, change who he was. But Kane didn't stop. Every day he drank the toxin, a little more each time. Most would have died. He became stronger. Other volunteers weren't. So lucky, out of 24, only Kane remained. One woman, Elsa, made it halfway. She smiled before she died. You're not scared, are you? She asked Kane. He shook his head. I don't remember how to be. One night, alarms blared inside Lab 7. The spore plant had broken its seal. Everyone was ordered to evacuate. Kane stayed. He walked into the room, breathed the spores, stared at the plant, and laughed. From that day, the scientists knew he had become the weapon. When the Threxel launched the final attack, the lab sent Kane to the front. Too late. The world was already dead. Cities quiet, skies gray. But Kane stepped into the silent battlefield and ate the plant. Now, he stood in the ruins of a crashed Threxel ship. The seed inside it pulsed. It looked different. Sharper, darker. This was not the same weapon. This was the next version. Version 2. He touched it. The seed reacted. Tiny veins reached out, wrapping around his fingers. It was trying to infect him, trying to kill. Kane closed his eyes and bit into it. His vision flashed. He saw stars, voices, a billion thoughts, all screaming at once. Then silence. Then something new. His body felt cold, then hot. Then full. But the pain didn't come. He looked at his hand. The green lines had turned darker. His fingernails blackened. His heartbeat slowed, then steadied. The seed dropped from his Mouth empty. Lifeless. He had absorbed it. The Threxel watched from space. Their biosensors screamed. He consumed the upgraded strain. A commander shouted, "Impossible. He should be dead." "He's not. He's changing again." "What is he?" Silence. Then the answer came. "He's a mutation." "No," said the High Commander. "He's evolution." Meanwhile, back on Earth, Project Eater's old data files were being downloaded. A group of survivors, 5 people in a bunker, had found Lab 7's archives. They watched old footage. They saw Kane's first tests, his injections, his pain, his first successful bite. One survivor, a young medic, whispered, "He wasn't made for war. He was made to become something else." They looked at each other, then at the spores growing near their air vents. No one spoke, but they all knew what was coming and what they had to become. Kane left the shipwreckage, walked toward a dead canyon. Inside, he saw more spore nests, dottons, all glowing. He didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, let the spores wrap around him. They hissed, screamed, clawed at his skin, and melted. He dropped to his knees and began to eat. One by one, hours passed. He emerged, breathing, deeply alive, more than alive. Something inside him had changed again, not just body, not just mind, something deeper. He could feel the spores. Now, hear their hum. They were not just weapons anymore. They were alive, and they were afraid of him. He looked at the stars. He could sense movement, ships pulling back, enemy worlds going dark. Running. Good. Let them run. He would follow. He opened a comm signal and whispered one sentence. "You built the future to kill us, but I am the future now." High above a ruined world, a red drone hovered in silence. It had one job: record, transmit, observe. The creature it had been watching was not a man anymore. He was something else, and the drone saw everything. Kane eating the spores, Kane walking through spore storms untouched, Kane consuming the next generation seed like it was candy. It sent the footage to every Threxel warship nearby, then to the command fleet, then to the Empire itself. By the time Kane left the canyon, his face was already on alien screens. Billions of Threxel watched in horror. Inside the capital hive, the high chamber shook with voices. The Threxel leaders, once calm and cold, now hissed and clashed. "He's one," a prime mind growled. "Just one." "But he survived every strain," said another. "Even the Omega seed." "That's impossible." "No," said the High Commander. "It's worse." They all turned. The commander pointed at the screen. The footage looped. Kane stood inside a storm of spores. He was breathing deeply. Calm, unafraid. "Watch," the commander said. "He's not just immune." They looked again. Saw the spores curling away from his skin, avoiding him, burning in the air. "What is this?" asked one general. "He's not fighting the spores anymore," the commander whispered. "They're afraid of him." Panic spread faster than any weapon. Fleet after fleet began retreating from infected zones. Border stations stopped sending messages. Some Threxel commanders refused to land on human-infected planets. Others destroyed their own soldiers, just to stop the risk. They called it the Eater Plague. It wasn't just Kane anymore. Rumors said others had begun to survive the spores too. Videos leaked of human rebels walking through green fields. Coughing, bleeding, but surviving. Some even smiled as they ate small spores, just like Kane. On Earth, the movement was growing. In the wastelands, hidden labs started copying Project Eater's formula. Some failed, many died, but a few changed. One man named Theo, once a farmer, was now walking barefoot through a spore field. He sang while he picked the plants and chewed them like berries. A child in another colony sat near a spore wall, drawing pictures of Kane. In one drawing, Kane had wings made of green fire. In a Threxel science station near the edge of the void, researchers studied the footage frame by frame. Kane's biology was no longer human. Bones denser, skin layered with spore-absorbing cells, muscles fused with alien DNA. He didn't evolve. He became something else, a living countervirus. The lead scientist wrote in his report, then paused, deleted the file, burned the lab, and ran. Kane walked through the ruins of an ancient city, once human, now nothing but dust and spores. He passed a wall on it. Someone had carved words with a knife. "We live because he did not fear." He touched the wall and kept walking. His senses were sharper now. He could hear Far-off whispers. Feel bioenergy in the ground. The spores were everywhere, but not attacking. Instead, they reacted like nervous animals. They shifted away from him, curled like vines in the wind. He was no longer their enemy. He was their king. Back in the Threxel capital, a decision was made. Delete the footage. A senior commander ordered. Destroy all drones carrying the image. Kill anyone who speaks his name. The High Commander shook his head. It's too late. He is already a myth. He is already everywhere. On human pirate ships, Kane's message was played before every mission. You made this to kill us, but I made it my food. Young soldiers shouted it like a war cry. Rebels painted his symbol on armor, 3 green lines across the chest. Even other alien species, once slaves of the Threxel, began to whisper stories of the man who ate death. Hope was returning to the galaxy. And fear was crawling back to its masters. In a distant Threxel colony, soldiers refused to land on an infected moon. The commander screamed at them. We have flamethrowers, we have suits. A soldier raised his weapon. But do we have what he has? No one answered. The ship turned round. Kane stood on a broken hilltop. He stared at the stars above. One by one, he watched Threxel ships flee into the night, leaving planets, abandoning bases. Fear was a better weapon than any spore, and Kane had become fear itself. That night, he lit a fire with a spark from a downed drone. He sat beside it, chewing on the last of the Omega seed. It had no taste, no power. It had given up. A voice crackled through a small human radio nearby. Is anyone out there? This is the Haven colony. We saw your footage. If you hear this, you're not alone. Kane leaned forward, picked up the radio, pressed the button. I know, he said, then clicked off. The spores around him danced in the wind, soft, gentle, not like death anymore, like light. Like dust, like the beginning of something new. Kane stood at the edge of a crater. Wind howled through the broken earth. Below, a ruined Threxel outpost lay twisted in the rock. Black towers, half-melted. Organic walls, pulsing with leftover life. He smelled fear in the air. Not human fear, alien fear. It tasted different, thinner. Colder. He walked down the slope without a sound. The ground hissed beneath his boots. Spores lifted into the air. They circled him, watched him, but did not touch. They knew what he was. Inside the outpost, 3 warriors watched him on their monitors. He's here, one whispered. Why? There's nothing left to eat. Another hissed. There's always more to eat. They locked down the gates, activated weapons, but deep inside, they knew it wouldn't matter. Nothing stopped him. Not guns, not fire, not death. Kane reached the main door. It opened before he could touch it. The outpost was alive, built from bio-tissue. It recognized him. He stepped inside. The walls pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. The lights flickered green. Kane walked through the hall. Without fear, strange shapes moved in the shadows. Machines made from bone and skin. Eyes followed him from the walls. No alarms sounded. No drones attacked. The outpost didn't know what to do. He was poisoned onto the spores. To the system. To everything they made. In the control chamber, the Threxel leader waited. His name was Sarkale. He was old, a battle-hardened general. He had seen hundreds of worlds fall, and now he faced one man. Alone. He raised his bioblade. If I die, he said, I die with honor. Kane stepped into the chamber, looked at the general, then looked past him at the seed vault behind the wall. You're guarding it, Kane said quietly, nodded. The next wave, he said. A living spore machine, built to eat planets. Kane stepped forward. No, he said, I eat that. Sarkale charged. Fast. Blade sharp. But Kane didn't move. The air shimmered. The spores between them turned to ash. Sarkale's blade hit Kane's chest. It cracked. The general fell. Back. Staring. Kane didn't even flinch. He walked past the stunned warrior, placed his hand on the vault. Door. It opened. Inside was the machine. Half-grown. Still. Pulsing. It looked like a giant black flower. Its petals were sharp as knives. Its core glowed with living energy. It was the future of the Threxel army. Kane reached out, touched the petals. They recoiled. He smiled, and bit in. Outside, the outpost trembled. Screams echoed through the walls. The machine inside the vault shook violently, then went silent. The light died. When Kane stepped out, he was glowing. His eyes were pure green. His veins shimmered under his skin. Sarkel still sat on the floor, stunned. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you keep eating?" Cain looked down at him. "Because you gave us no choice," he said. "You taught us to fear your weapons. But fear tastes different now." He walked out, left the outpost behind. As he walked, plants wilted in his path. Spores collapsed into dust. The land began to change, faster than before. He wasn't just immune, he was reversing them in space. Above the outpost planet, a Threxel fleet hovered, watching, recording. When Cain emerged, every ship froze, sensors flashed warnings, energy levels spiked. One commander gave the order, "Fire on the surface now." The ships released beams of light, high temperature, plasma. It rained down on the planet. The outpost vanished in flames. Smoke swallowed everything. The ground turned to glass. But then, something moved in the fire. A figure walked out of the ash. Alive. Cain. Still. Glowing. Still walking. One Threxel admiral fell to his knees. "This cannot be." "It is," the High Commander said. "He is coming, not with ships, not with armies, but with something worse. Certainty." On Earth, survivors received the footage. One child watched the image of Cain walking through fire. He turned to his mother. "Is he a hero?" She shook her head. "No, son, he's a mirror." Elsewhere, rebel humans began crafting armor like Cain's. Their skin was marked with spores, but they were changing, not dying. Whispers grew louder. "We don't run anymore. We eat what hunts us." Inside a secret Threxel vault, elders debated. "Shall we release the last weapon?" One asked. A device hidden for centuries, forbidden. Alive. Even more dangerous than the spore machine. No one said, "He'll eat it too." Cain stood at the edge of a cliff. Below, a green valley once ruled by Threxel life. Now it was still no spores grew, only silence. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a single spore seed, looked at it, then let it fall. The wind took it, carried it far away, into darkness. He spoke to no one. But the spores heard. The Threxel felt it. The galaxy listened, and the message was clear. "I am not the weapon. I am the end of it." The rain fell softly. It wasn't water, it was spore. Rain. Light. Green. Glowing. It drifted down over the valley like mist from another world. But it no longer killed. Not here. Not anymore. Because Cain had walked through this place, and everything had changed. Cain stood at the center of a stone circle. Once part of a Threxel shrine, now cracked and buried in ash. His body was still, but inside, he was burning. His skin no longer felt human. It was warm, but not like heat. It pulsed gently, like it was alive. Lines ran through his flesh, glowing, veins of green and black. His eyes had turned brighter, no longer white, only green with thin black rings. When he blinked, the wind around him shifted. Even the air listened to him now. He breathed deeply. The spores flowed into him like smoke, but they didn't harm him. They carried information, voices, memories. Cain could feel what they felt. He could hear the forests. On dead planets, he could taste the fear inside the Threxel ships orbiting above. He was no longer separate from the spores. He was part of them. Or maybe, they were now part of him. Far away, in a hidden human command base, alarms rang. Dr. Helen Voss, one of the last surviving scientists from Project Eta, stared at her screen. "No, this can't be right," she whispered. Cain's latest biological reading had just come through. It was impossible. His DNA had rewritten itself again. Human and alien genes now fully merged. His neural activity was 3 times higher than the normal brain. He could survive temperatures of 700 degrees Celsius. He didn't need food anymore. He didn't even seem to sleep. She stared at the data, and one word appeared in her mind: post-human. The military commander beside her slammed his hand on the table. "You said he was a tool," he shouted. "Something we could use." Dr. Voss looked pale. "We didn't make him. We unlocked him." In a chamber deep below the base, several young soldiers sat in silence. Each had taken early versions of the Eta formula. Some had green eyes. Others had small glowing spots on their skin, but none were like Cain. One boy leaned forward. "Is he still human?" No one answered. Back in the valley, Cain sat beside a dried stream. He placed his hand on the ground, and something bloomed. A tiny flower, soft and glowing. It wasn't a spore. It was something new, something the spores had never made before. He smiled, then frowned. Because he felt something else. Pain, but not his own. Someone else. Far away, on a dying moon, he closed his eyes and saw it. A group of humans surrounded by Threxel hunters, cornered, trapped, no escape. A child crying, a man coughing blood. Kane stood up. And walked. Within minutes, he reached a field. Green lightning crackled overhead. His feet didn't leave tracks anymore. The spores lifted him slightly with every step. He reached a twisted spore tree, placed his hand on it, and vanished on the dying moon. The trapped humans were ready to make their last stand, but something shifted in the air. The spores turned black. The sky shimmered, and Kane appeared. Just appeared. The Threxel froze. One tried to run. Kane raised his hand. The spore tree beside the soldier exploded into vines and wrapped him in silence. The others ran. Kane walked forward. The humans stared in shock. "You're real," one woman whispered. He nodded. "I felt your fear." He walked past them, touched the ground on the spores around. The moon began to die, instantly, like snow melting under a flame. The humans followed him to the edge of a cliff. Below them, a Threxel command station blinked with lights. Kane turned his head. "You can leave now," he said. "What about the station?" one man asked. Kane's eyes glowed brighter. "I'll eat it." In the Threxel station, red alarms blared. Energy surge. A technician screamed. Something just arrived inside the station. The commander turned to the screen. Kane stood in the hallway. Alone, unafraid. The doors melted around him. Walls twisted and cracked. The station's organic systems screamed. Weapons deployed. Spore gas flooded the hall. But Kane walked through it like it was rain. He didn't even blink. He reached the main chamber, touched the core. It was the central spore brain, a creature the size of a house. It hissed. Fired. Tendrils. Spikes. Flame. But Kane didn't stop. He pressed his hand into its flesh and breathed in deeply. The spore brain shuddered, screamed, then collapsed. In seconds, the whole station went dark outside. The humans on the cliff saw the station fall into itself, silent. Dead. Kane stepped out from the smoke. A child walked up to him. "Are you a god?" Kane knelt. "No, I'm just what happens when you push a species too far." Later that night, Kane sat beside a dead lake. He looked up at the sky. Stars blinked. He could feel every Threxel ship. He could hear their leaders whispering. They were running out of options, but they still had one card left, and he could feel it. Waking up, he spoke into the air. "I know what you're planning. Release it. I'll eat that too." Far away, in the cold dark of space, something opened. It was not a door, not a ship, not a machine. It was a prison, a living vault, locked for 1,000 years, buried deep in the Threxel's oldest world, a world even they feared. They called it the mouth of extinction. Inside it was their last weapon. A spore, not a beast, but something worse. A mind, a living hive mind, made only of spore intelligence, older than their empire, built from war. It had no body, only thought, only hunger. The Threxel called it Zargel. Kane felt it the moment it woke. He was sitting by a quiet river on a ruined moon. Birds had started returning. New plants grew where spores had once ruled. Life was returning. But the moment Zargel opened its eyes, the river froze. The birds vanished. The wind stopped. Kane stood up, eyes glowing. He whispered to the sky. They woke it. Across the stars, Threxel ships fled their own worlds. Zargel did not care about masters or slaves. It only saw survival. And Kane was the threat. To the spores. To the memory of the war. So Zargel reached out and spoke into every spore in the galaxy. On Earth, survivors screamed. Spore walls turned black. Old wounds reopened. Plants twisted violently. The air thickened, like something angry had returned. In human labs, machines sparked. Voices whispered in dark corners. Dr. Voss grabbed her head. "He's speaking through them." She gasped. "No," another scientist said. "He's consuming them." Kane dropped to one knee. For the first time in weeks, he felt pain. Real pain. Zargel was too big, too old. Its mind pressed against his own, trying to break in, trying to take control. But Kane was not a normal host. He had grown beyond the spores. He didn't just resist them, he reprogrammed them. Inside his mind, he found himself standing in a black field. The sky above was made of green lightning. In front of him stood a shadow. Tall, made of vines and fire and screams. It had no face, but it spoke. "You are not welcome," the shadow said. Cain stared at it. "I didn't come to talk. I came to end you." The shadow laughed. "I am the last memory of the first war. I am what made the spores. You are a mistake." Cain stepped forward. "No, I'm the correction." Suddenly, spikes of pain shot through his brain. Cain screamed. Blood ran from his nose. His body twitched on the ground. Nearby, spores, panicked, shifting colors, vibrating. The earth cracked. The sky darkened. A wave of black clouds began to move across planets. Jules' presence spread faster than light. Planets turned cold. Oceans boiled. Spore storms returned in full force. This time, they didn't kill, they converted. Millions of spores turned gray and stiff, then reshaped into creatures. Gray walkers. Mouthles, boneless, moving like shadows, following only one voice. Jules. Cain stood back up. Inside and out. His body burned, but he didn't fall. He couldn't. Not now. He knew what was happening. Jules wasn't using the spores anymore. It was becoming them. The entire spore network HFY was now alive, and Cain was the only one who could speak its language. He had one chance. He found the nearest spore tree, pressed his palm to its bark, closed his eyes, and connected, not with words, but with memory. He sent his pain, his hunger, his evolution. He let the spores feel what he had become. Not just immune, not just eater, but a being that understood them. Loved them, freed them. A billion spores flickered. They stopped moving, then changed color from black to green. In space, Zargel screamed. Its mind twisted. Some of its own spores had broken away. Some had joined Cain. He was corrupting the hive, faster than expected. On a Threxel warship near the core, leaders shouted, "It's working. He's turning them," but not fast enough, said the High Commander. "If he fails, everything ends." Cain opened his eyes. He was glowing. His veins now burned gold. A new light, something pure, a form of energy, never seen before. It pulsed outward. Every step he took sent that light across the land. The spores obeyed. The ground shifted. Mountains cracked. Skies parted. The war was no longer between species. It was between thoughts, between fear and freedom. Inside his mind, the black shadow screamed again. "You cannot stop me. I have consumed galaxies." Cain answered softly. "Then you've never met someone like me." He raised both hands, and everything turned white. Across 5 systems, spore clouds vanished in a flash. The gray walkers turned to dust. Threxel weapons melted. Silence returned. But not empty silence, peaceful silence, the kind that follows a storm. Cain fell to his knees, alive, exhausted, changed. His skin shimmered like crystal. His breath glowed. He looked at the sky. It was clearer than ever. Stars blinked quietly. No clouds, no spores. For the first time, Zargel was not gone, but it was hurt, weakened, forced back into the prison it had once controlled. The spores had chosen Cain, and Cain had chosen life in a ruined temple. A small Threxel child touched a vine. It bloomed with golden light. He looked up at the stars. Smiled and whispered, "He's winning." The stars were calm, but Cain was not. He stood in a silent valley, surrounded by flowers born from corrupted spores. They glowed gold. Alive, peaceful. But inside him, something stirred, something heavy, different from the pain of war. It was deeper, older. He could feel the spores, whispering again. But this time, not from fear. They were warning him. He sat down beside a rock, placed his hand on the ground. The earth hummed under his palm. It was like the planet was breathing then. A memory appeared. In his mind, not his but buried deep in the spore network, a vision, a laboratory. Cold. Metal walls, and inside, a human child, born in a tank, his skin pale, veins glowing faintly. Green. Machines surrounding him. A woman cried in the background, and one sentence echoed from the vision. "We didn't find the spores, we made them." Cain opened his eyes. His pulse raced. He had always believed the spores were alien, a Threxel weapon. But the memory said something else. The spores were made by humans. Long ago, before the war, before the Threxel. He stood up slowly. The spores swirled around his body. He whispered, "What are you hiding from me?" But the spores said nothing, only flickered in his light, far across the stars, in the broken capital of the Threxel Empire. Chaos ruled. Leaders argued. Some demanded peace. Others called for one last strike. The High Commander stood in silence. He was staring at a single report, a location buried deep in old Earth archives, marked as Project Genesis. "We thought the humans were the disease," he said, "but we were wrong. They were the gardeners." He gave the order, "Send a fleet to Earth, find Genesis, burn it." Back on Earth, Kane stood near a cliff. He watched a small human scout ship land and carried 5 survivors, scientists wounded. Desperate, they ran to him. One woman stepped forward, her hands shaking. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said. "The child, the lab." Kane nodded. She took a breath. "I was part of that program. I helped create the first spores." The wind went still. Even the plants quieted. She continued. "It was supposed to be a cure for Earth's failing crops, a living plant that could fix dead soil. But something went wrong. It adapted too fast, became something else. The spores were born, and they escaped." Kane looked away. "You made this," he said softly. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "We tried to stop it. We thought we buried it. But the Threxel found the seed later. They made it their weapon." Kane turned back to her. "But it still obeys me." She nodded. "Because you're connected to it. You are the last part of Genesis." In the sky above, stars moved. The Threxel fleet had arrived. Thousands of ships, dark, sharp, alive. They hovered just beyond the atmosphere, waiting, watching. Kane raised his hand. The spores answered. Plants began to rise. Green towers from the ground, living vines curling up into the clouds. A wall of life, a shield made not of metal, but memory. On board the Threxel flagship, a general screamed. "He's building a defense." From the planet itself, the High Commander did not move. He only watched the image of Kane on the screen, and gave a new order. "Send the sleeper." Far behind the fleet, a black object was released. It was not a ship, it was a coffin, 10,000 years old. It had no crew, only one being inside, frozen, sealed, not Rexal, not human, but something made from both, a creature from the First War, a failure, a monster, born from the same project as the spores. Its name was Null. Kane felt it instantly, before it moved, before it woke. A spike of cold stabbed into his chest. He gasped. The spores shook violently. Some turned gray and fell dead. Kane whispered, "What did you bring here?" The woman beside him backed away. Her voice shook. "They had it. No one was supposed to open that vault." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. Kane Null was the first human to take the spore formula. He didn't evolve. He merged. The black coffin reached the upper atmosphere. It cracked, hissed, opened. Something stepped out. It had no face, no eyes. Its skin pulsed with both light and shadow. It screamed once, and the scream was heard by every spore on the planet. Even Kane stumbled back. Null landed hard. Dust flew for miles. Then silence. The spores near it died. Instantly, flowers wilted. The air burned. It walked toward Kane. Slowly, not fast, not with rage, but with purpose. Kane stood his ground. He had never seen fear in a spore before, but now he did. Null stopped a few meters away. Its voice was not a sound, it was a thought, pushed into every mind. "You are the echo, I am the origin." Kane clenched his fists. "If you were the beginning, then I'm the end." They stared at each other. The valley cracked beneath them. Clouds twisted in the sky, and the spores, for the first time, did not know which side to follow. The world held its breath above the broken valley, between the burning skies and the dying spores. Two beings faced each other, one born from human will, the other born from human failure. Kane and Null. Null's body flickered with black veins and silver light. It didn't walk. It floated. It left no sound behind, only silence. Kane stepped forward. The spores around him buzzed nervously. Plants shook the ground, trembled. Even the clouds seemed to pull back. They knew what was about to happen. Null spoke first, but not with a voice. With pressure. Kane felt it. In his head, his heart, his blood. "You carry the future," Null said, "but I carry the truth." Kane clenched his jaw. "If truth means fear, then you're already forgotten." Null raised one hand. The spores around it burned away like paper. Not just killed, unwritten. as if they never existed. Kane's eyes narrowed. That was no simple spore control. That was spore erasure. And then, Null attacked. No warning, just speed. It moved like lightning, hit Kane with a wave of force that cracked the mountains. Kane flew back, smashing through stone and spore trees. He hit the ground hard. The dirt turned to glass beneath him, but he rose, breathing slow, face calm, veins glowing. Brighter dot. The gold inside him shimmered with heat. He looked at Null. This is what you call power. He raised both hands. The ground beneath Null exploded. Green tendrils shot upward, thousands, grabbing the creature's legs, arms, chest, holding it still. But Null didn't struggle. It pulsed once. The vines shriveled, turned to dust. Null floated, free again. In the sky above, the Threxel fleet watched silently. No one dared speak. Sensors couldn't explain what they were seeing. Every second, the battlefield changed. Spore zones vanished. New life grew. Then died. Then returned again, as if reality itself was being rewritten. Back on Earth, Dr. Voss screamed into her comms. Pull all sportional signals offline. Get every survivor into shelters. It's not just a fight, it's a reset. But no one knew what that meant. Not yet. In the valley, Kane and Null clashed again. This time, Kane was faster. He struck with light. Pure spore energy turned into a blade in his hand. He cut through Null's chest. A clean strike. But no blood came out, only more light. And inside it, voices. Kane froze. He heard screams. Human, Rexal, child, soldier, billions of lives, trapped inside Null. Null struck back. A beam of antilight fired from its chest. Kane jumped, but the blast caught his leg. It vanished, not wounded, not burned, just erased. He fell to the ground. Gasping, looked at the empty space where his leg had been. But the spores rushed to him like bees around a broken hive, and in seconds, they rebuilt it. A new leg formed, better, faster. Kane stood again, eyes glowing with fury. You're a prison, Kane said. All those lives, locked inside you. Null didn't answer, but its light dimmed slightly, almost like it hesitated. Kane took a deep breath and stepped forward. I don't want to destroy you, but I will. Because they didn't die to make you, they died to make me. Null screamed. A pulse of silence tore through the land. Time slowed. Everything stopped. Birds mid-flight, rocks mid-fall. Even sound vanished. Only Kane moved. He walked forward through frozen air. Each step heavier than the last, but he kept moving. And when he reached Null, he placed his hand on its chest. Whispers flooded his mind. Memories. Pain. Truth. And the truth was worse than he imagined. Null had been human once, a child named Aiden, the first test subject for Project Genesis. He had survived the spores, but not completely. His mind had broken, his soul scattered. He had become the core of the spore. Intelligence, a walking grave of memories, a perfect weapon, made by humans, rejected by them, then found by the Threxel. Kane closed his eyes. He whispered, I see you now. You weren't made to be a god. You were made to be a warning. Null didn't fight, not anymore. Its arms dropped, its light flickered, and Kane pulled it in, held it like a brother. The spores circled them both for the first time. They didn't buzz with fear, they sang. Softly, like wind in a forest. Kane breathed out and whispered one final word. Sleep. The light inside Null dimmed. His body cracked like crystal. Then shattered. Into a billion glowing spores. They didn't fall, they floated, upward, into the sky, joining the stars. The battle was over. But Kane was different now. He didn't glow gold anymore. He didn't shimmer. He just stood, quietly. Human again, and yet more than human. The Threxel fleet slowly turned away. They didn't fire, they didn't speak. They simply left, because they had seen something no empire could destroy. They had seen evolution. All across the galaxy, spores began to change. Fields grew where wastelands had ruled. Sick children healed. Overnight, the air became lighter, cleaner. The war was ending, not with explosions, but with understanding. Kane walked alone to the top of the valley. He looked at the stars, felt peace. Real peace, for the first time in his life. Behind him, the woman scientist approached slowly. Is it over? She asked. Kane didn't turn. He just said, almost, because one last seed still remained, and it was inside him. Kane stood at the top of the world. Alone, silent. The wind moved around him like it knew who he was. Below him, the land was green again, once filled with death, now covered with life. Spore trees stood tall, but they didn't kill anymore. They healed, they grew. They listened, because Kane was here, and everything had changed. But not everything was over, not yet. Inside Kane's body, something still moved. A seed. Small. Bright. Alive. He had carried it ever since the battle with Null. But it wasn't from Null. It wasn't Threxal. It wasn't even part of Project Genesis. It was something new. It had been created in the moment of fusion when Kane had touched Null's heart, when the light and dark had become one. That final burst of spore energy didn't disappear. It transformed. It became a final message, a final weapon, or maybe a final chance. Far above Earth, the last Threxal ship hovered in orbit. It didn't fire, didn't speak, it just watched on inside. The High Commander sat alone in silence. He stared at a small screen. Kane's image glowed on it, and beside it, a warning. Light blinked. Unknown energy source rising from the surface. Uncontrollable. Unstoppable. Back on the ground. Kane placed his hand on the soil, and the ground answered. A pulse of green shot outward from him. Not violent, not like war, more like a heartbeat. One, then two, then faster. Every planet that still had spores felt it. The whole galaxy paused in space. Stations. In burned cities. In broken ships. People looked up. Animals froze. Machines buzzed and then shut down, and across the stars, the spores woke up. They didn't attack. They didn't spread. They did something they had never done before. They waited but Kane for his decision. Behind him, the human woman Dr. Voss arrived. She had run to find him. Her voice cracked. Kane, she whispered, your energy levels are rising too fast. You need to rest. You'll burn. But Kane only smiled. I'm not burning. I'm becoming. He looked at her. His eyes were no longer green. They were silver now, reflecting everything. All pain, all joy, all history. I've seen it all, he said softly. What we were, what they made, what we turned into. He placed his hand on his chest, and now, what we can become. Dr. Voss dropped to her knees. Tears filled her eyes. You're going to leave, aren't you? Kane nodded once. If I stay, this power will destroy me. But if I go, he turned to the sky. I can shape everything. He stood now at the edge of the cliff. His body glowed brighter. The seed inside him pulsed louder than it spoke. To him, in words, but in memory, it showed him a future. Children playing in green fields. Cities rising again. Threxal and humans sharing the same air. The spores turned into medicine, into food, into bridges between stars. A galaxy healed, not by war, but by will. Kane smiled. I see it. He closed his eyes and let go. His body lifted off the ground. The wind screamed. The ground cracked but did not break. From Kane's chest, the final seed bloomed. It didn't fall. It rose with him, a flower of energy, not spore, not machine, something beyond both. Dr. Voss watched, shielding her eyes from the light. She whispered to herself, he's becoming the bridge. From orbit the High Commander watched. The energy reached space. It touched their ship. It didn't damage anything. It healed. Rust peeled off. Systems restarted, and the crew felt peace, for the first time in centuries, and on every planet. Spores changed. They no longer followed Threxal commands, no longer obeyed human science. They followed a new path, the Kane pattern, a balance between survival and growth, between power and peace. Then, in one final flash, Kane was gone. No explosion, no body, just lighta pulse across the stars, and silence. But the change had begun. 1 year later, children in the rebuilt colony of Haven play near a glowing tree. Its leaves hum with soft music. Spores hover like dust, but no one fears them anymore. Instead, they use them to grow food, to heal wounds, to power machines. A little girl points at the tree. Who made that? Her mother kneels beside her. A man who ate death and gave us life. In the new Threxal council chambers, leaders speak in many voices. Some human, some alien, some who were once enemies, now friends. A shared seat is left empty. In Kane's honor. In the stars, somewhere deep in space, a new star is born. It glows with strange light. Not fire, but something else. Inside it, A human shape drifts, eyes closed, peaceful, and spores dance around him like stars. They call it the seed star. Because Cain didn't die, he evolved. He became part of the universe, part of the code that now shapes all. Spores, a living system, a guardian, a memory, not a soldier, not a weapon, just a man who made the impossible choice to eat what killed millions and turn it into hope. The war is over, but the legend will never end. The end.